Welcome everyone to the first edition of SDG Action Conclave 2020. We are here today conducting this session focusing on SDG Goal 2, that is zero hunger. The goal aims to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and provide sustainable agriculture. Youth Forum is a project under Alexis Society, and our team consists of inspired young students and professionals who are actively interested in conducting positive social impact by conducting research in policy issues, writing through writing thought-provoking and insightful blogs, designing creative social media campaigns, organizing life-changing events, and interviewing leaders and changemakers. As it is correctly said, the youth are not only leaders of tomorrow, but also partners in today. So we at Youth Forum, a team of creative and encouraging individuals, work with a shared mission, a mission to change the world. So, through this first edition of SDG Action Conclave, we wish to bring together the changemakers and the leaders from around the globe under the hashtag Act for SDGs campaign week of the United Nations. It will help to prepare an achievable agenda, actionable agenda that will aid us all in achieving sustainable development goals through our initiatives and more. While the world leaders meet virtually in the United Nations General Assembly to take up pressing issues and give a solution to the tough times, we are trying to do our little bit by taking action and raising awareness and initiating a better direction ahead. The turning point of the planet and the people needs to be now. Having said that, let me introduce to you our speaker for today, Mr. Paul Newman. Paul Newman heads up the Sustainable Development Goal 2 Advocacy Hub as a director, an initiative bringing together NGOs, advocacy groups, civil society, the private sector, and UN agencies to coordinate global campaigns and advocacy to achieve SDG 2. To this end, the SDG2 Hub facilitates a network of 700 chefs from 70 countries to support chef action of the SDGs. Chefs are equipped with a simple set of actions called the Chef Manifesto to drive progress on the global goals. Paul specializes in generating solutions to complex problems alongside communities around the world. Paul has over 20 years' experience in and extensive knowledge of the not for profit sector, having worked in nutrition and global roles with a focus on campaigning, youth mobilization, advocacy, marketing, and communication, working strategically alongside actors for all aspects of the food, agriculture, and nutrition industries. Paul seeks to generate change that will impact our food systems and planet. Having said that, I would like to introduce to you our chair for today, Mr. Kunal Mandal. Mr. Kunal Mandal is the co-founder of Gyan Space, a gamification company which prepares on quizzes and other games as a tool for personal growth and people's encouragement. He is also a co-founder of another traveling company, which is cityforbytes.com. It helps the tourists to take to take around the city and look around with local aspects. Currently, he is on a mission to teach curiosity as a life skill, increase awareness and sustainability, and empower young Indians to be more than they thought they could do. Having said that, I welcome Mr. Paul Newman and hand over the conversation to Mr. Mandal.
Thank you so much, Radhika, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you who is joining in and listening for today's session. I have a very, very special guest with me, and that is Paul Newnham. Paul, welcome. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
And you have been working, for Goal 2. Your organization is called Goal SDG2 Advocacy Hub, and it's such a close. I mean, I've spoken to you before, and I've realized that this is very, very close to your heart, solving this problem. And hunger is often and quite rightly called the world's greatest solvable problem. Despite that, nearly 500 million people in Asia are hungry. A quarter of a million in Africa have the same problem. But if we know that it's a solvable problem, then why hasn't it been solved yet? What are some of the key challenges and solutions according to you?
Yeah, look, Kunal, it is a challenge because in many ways it is a solvable problem, and that's not, that is slightly recently. In the past, every part of the world had hungry periods where there wasn't enough food produced, and so people would be hungry. But we've managed to improve agriculture around the world, improve productivity. And so now we produce enough food to feed 1.5 times the population of the earth. And so we've kind of solved that part of the problem, which is the supply side. The challenge has been that solving hunger is not just about providing and producing enough calories for people to have. We already have enough calories. The issue is it's also connected to sufficient nutrition, to the distribution of food. And so what we've got is, in part, as we've solved the problem, we've also created unintended consequences. So we have a lack of biodiversity in our diets. We are now getting 60% of all calories from just 4 crops. Out of the 30,000 edible foods in the world, our diets are made up from about 150. So you end up with this narrowing of what we're eating at a time when you also have people not getting the right nutrition, and also people not getting enough calories and being hungry. And so it is really challenging from that perspective. There's a number of other compacting issues around this. So we also see in certain parts of the world lots of food waste. We see, because of the plethora of choice, because of the way food is stored, we see lots of wastage go on. And this is happening in parts of the world that are more developed and parts that are also least developed. You're seeing waste in both sides, where people are not being able to use the whole vegetables, use the whole the plants in different ways. We're also seeing that there's a big issue, and many of the hungriest people in the world are really affected because of climate issues. So you're seeing climate change increasing the number of emergencies that are happening. So we're seeing more floods, droughts, fires, all of these kinds of issues happening. And when that happens, it puts food systems into a challenge. And we're also seeing conflict, and conflict is still happening in many parts of the world. And when conflict happens, the food system is very hard to sort of maintain and continue. Even the recent COVID challenge, and I remember seeing in India some news reports of the challenge of locking down when people are used to daily going to the market, finding food, having to actually work each day. The challenge was not the fear of the COVID-19, it was fear of hunger, because if we go and lock ourselves in our house, we then don't have access to food. So it's very complex. And I think this is part of the reason why it hasn't been solved so far. There's lots of challenges. There are solutions, technology. There's lots of different things that are happening that are meeting these challenges, but we still have an affordability problem with the gap between in wealth that we see. We also have an access problem around nutritious food. So some people might be getting enough calories, but not getting the right nutrition. And so we need to think about that. And then the conflict and climate change are also very big issues.
Yeah, I think you rightfully said that conflict and climate change is one of the key issues when it comes to food as well. And with that, I will lead to another question which comes to my mind. That you believe in the thought of people trusting people over companies. And you have worked in South Sudan, where you saw a great outcome of empowering people in attaining not alone food, but other securities too. Having said that, how do you think zero hunger as a goal can be worked up on amid refugee crisis and internally displaced people, and most importantly, as you mentioned, too many communities these days are stuck in civil wars and turmoil. I mean, you have traveled across the world and seen these issues firsthand. So how do you think we can, in that scenario, how do we, take it forward?
Yeah. So I think it starts with the challenge of seeing, I mean, in too often in many parts of the world, food is seen as a weapon. And so it's used as a way to control populations. It's used to be taken off communities that don't support political agendas. And so I think, at a policy level, what we have to do is ask and demand that food is a right, and it's not used as a weapon. And so wherever we see that happening, we should be speaking out about that, because everyone deserves the right to have access to food. Then the way that the food is actually supplied. And so you talked a bit about South Sudan. I think there's been lots of interesting initiatives and innovations that have happened in the way that food security and food support has been given. So in the past, it used to be often bought from one part of the world and then dropped in another to help meet a need of hunger. Now there's a lot more local sourcing. There's a lot more use of cash-based transfers. And so groups like the World Food Program have worked where they give people locally in one part of the country, they may buy the grain, which supports the market locally, and then use that in an emergency part of the country. The other thing I've seen, and this is in South Sudan, was there's like cash-based, not cash, sorry, like a food for work program where you get food, and in response, you do community projects which help to improve the community. And so that could be helping improve access for transport. It could be building community ponds, to do fish farming, lots of different initiatives that are helping to improve the economic situation for people, as well as also improve their hunger. And so I think there's ways that can be done that complement the challenging situation. But honestly, it's very difficult when conflict is there for you to actually really have an end to hunger, because it really creates that insecurity, and it also creates the movement of people. And when people are moving, it's very hard for them to also be accessing food.
Yeah, I think that would be one of the biggest challenges that we will face in the future, considering so many people are getting displaced due to various reasons, and it would be, the onus would be on us, to find a solution to that problem.
Exactly. It's a big challenge.
True, exactly. Any challenge, right? And lots of young entrepreneurs are listening in, and any challenge which is big enough for them to solve, I hope they will be inspired from our conversation and probably think about the problem more deeply and sort of come up with solutions, innovative solutions. So let's hope for that. Now, let me move to another context and piece of the puzzle. So statistics across reflects on the irony that the popularly recognized people responsible for food delivery, that is women in households and farmers as the primary source, are the ones more vulnerable to food insecurity and hunger. According to the World Food Program, over 690 million people who are food insecure in the world right now, but 60% of them are women and girls. What are your comments on the same, and how do you think this issue can be resolved?
Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. I was talking to somebody even just the other day, and I think part of the challenge is around the rights of women in many parts of the world. And without those rights, the rights to ownership, the ability for them to be able to not only contribute, but to actually have ownership rights. So around land, it's very key. A lot of the farming land is farmed by women around the world, and yet it's owned by men. And this is sometimes women are not allowed to own land. There's actually cultural reasons, but there's also sometimes legal reasons. And so what the issue with that is, then that leaves it open to be abused and for women to not get the benefits. At the same time, often you see that finance is given out to men in different communities, and then it can be used on other things that are not the family. What we've found in many microfinance institutions and with loans, if you give women the money, it's often used to improve the family. It's not, none of this is universal. There's always like examples on both sides, but the trends show that the investment in women and girls will mean that there is more benefit given to the family around improvement of nutrition, food access and availability. Often in some cultures, though, the men will eat first, and then the women will eat after. And so in times of lean seasons or where there's not enough food, that then means that the women don't necessarily get the same choice of the food. They don't get as much in quantity. Or they give it often to the children. So there's these kinds of cultural issues, these cultural dynamics that play, but there's also legal dynamics which play around ownership. I was talking to somebody recently about dairy cattle in India, and I think they told me something like 5% are only owned by women. And yet there's many women that will work with looking after the cattle, raising the cattle, helping to graze them, milk them, these kinds of things. But they're owned often by the men. So there's these kinds of cultural issues which I think have to be addressed. And there's often a very clear examples of when they are addressed, and there is even just some more balance and some shift. You do get improvements around education, around nutrition in communities.
Great. Now, one of the things that, so when I first met you, I, of course, heard about this thing called Chef's Manifesto, and it really, really fascinated me how you, what kind of work you were doing there. And you have often stated that chefs can play a really key role by using and sourcing new ingredients. And under the Chef's Manifesto, of course, you have brought together 700 or more than 700 chefs from 70 countries to champion healthy and sustainable diets. Apart from, of course, the good food that the chefs produce, please tell us more about the project Chef Manifesto itself and the kind of impact it has had delivered so far.
Yeah, so the Chef's Manifesto is a chef-led project that brings together a huge number of chefs around the world, as you said. And the idea is to really connect the work around sustainability that chefs are doing locally. When we look at development has to be thought of in different spheres. You do have to contribute globally. You have to look at the national impact, but you also have to go local, because people are all working from a context, from a space. Different parts of the world, no matter where you are, will have a different reality. The food systems are very different, whether you're in a city or you're in a rural area, whether you're in a corporate environment, you're in a village environment, depending on where you are. And so what we did was we understood that in the areas of agriculture, nutrition, and food, often we talk a lot about the processes involved. We talk about inputs and outputs. We talk very technically around nutrition, around agriculture, what makes things work. The challenge with that is people connect to nutrition and commodities and food through what they eat. And when they think about what they eat, they often will get that from how they cook and how you bring together those ingredients. And chefs, we found, are very trusted. They're very admired because they bring those ingredients into flavors, into dishes that we love, that we replicate, that we enjoy. And food, we know, is so much more than just what we eat. It's also who we eat with, how we eat, all of the things. Like I can see, it automatically brings a smile to your face, because food is something that brings us joy. It brings us love. It brings us connection. What you like is going to bring what, your heritage, your experience, your family, all those memories flooding back. And so food is something that's amazing. And chefs have this ability to tell stories and to create dishes and experiment with different ingredients in a way that helps to elevate. So what I suppose we did with the Chef's Manifesto is we wanted to connect the work already happening up to a framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, as everyone may or may not know, is a plan that was set in 2015 by all the world leaders to address 17 of the biggest issues we face. And it creates a framework, but that framework is a global framework. And chefs are able to contribute to that, just like every one of us can contribute. But what we did was we wanted to make it really easy for chefs to connect the work that they're doing to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we came up with these 8 areas. And there are areas around like investment in livelihoods, protection of biodiversity, improving animal welfare, celebrating local and seasonal food, educating on food safety and healthy diets, these kinds of things, which are very universal, but we wanted to then put them out globally into a network. And what happens in that is chefs sign up, they then commit to these kind of goals, and they share their experience. And so we have chefs from India sharing with chefs from Colombia, for example, or chefs from Australia with chefs from the Middle East, and then chefs in South Africa sharing with, So the idea is that each country has different solutions, has different innovations that are part of the future. And together, we have this ability of learning from one another and accelerating that change. And so this is what the Chef's Manifesto is about. What some of the things we've achieved, we're really seeing lots of strength in the achievement at the local level. So chefs are promoting, they're educating communities around biodiversity, they're building relationships with farmers, they're working on food programs, meeting needs. And so they're showcasing, they're thinking about, so some do education, others are making choices around the supplies they use, the farmers they work with, how they support the environment and biodiversity through their waste programs. And then there's others that are doing education. They're using their platform to educate people around new crops and different things that use less water or that are better for you. And so there's lots of different things. We've created a podcast, which you can go to chefsmanifesto.com. We have a podcast. We also have some case studies. And I encourage you and the people listening in to check that out, because it's great to hear from different chefs around the world. It sparks ideas and it sparks like solutions. And you can then go, what do I think about that? And how do I adjust that in my community? So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I rightfully agree. And I like your T-shirt, which clearly says that food is life, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's right on point. And I think chefs can really contribute more meaningfully towards, bringing more diversity to our plate, and also, to support the local ecosystem. Now, from that, what comes to my mind is, of course, ingredients. And SDG2 Advocacy Hub has been at the forefront of safeguarding biodiversity. And you have also promoted the Future 50 foods. So tell us what the future of nutrition looks like from the context of delicious dishes and ingredients.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done a lot on biodiversity, because I think one of the challenges has been that in the work that's happened around trying to bring more affordability to food, we've focused on certain ingredients, which have then been able to become cheaper and cheaper because we've improved technology, we've improved agricultural process. And that's great, because it means there is enough food now and it's actually more affordable. The challenge is that in doing that, what we've also lost is some of the diversity in our system. And we know that biodiversity is so critical. because in biodiversity, we have answers to many of the solutions that we are facing and that we will face in the future. So within biodiversity, we have solutions to crops that grow different varieties within species or across species, different things that will grow with less water or that will grow with higher temperature or lower temperature. There's all different skills and tight little things to learn from different plants. And we all know that plants and animals will adapt to different regions. But as the climate changes, as the world continues to change quickly, we need that biodiversity. And part of it is it also helps in our diet, because the more diverse diet we have, the more nutrients we get, the more micronutrients, the different elements that build into it. And as our diets become focused more on these 4 key crops, we've lost some of that nutrients. And so that means that we have higher calories, but we're not necessarily getting the nutrients we need. And so we've done a lot of work around promoting biodiversity with chefs to make food interesting and exciting, because often people look at an ingredient and they go, what do I do with this? How do I use it? And so the Future 50 Foods was one initiative that was done by the World WWF and Unilever to pick 50 foods which are good for people and good for planet. And they're 50 foods that they're encouraging people to add to their diets. And so we thought that was a great initiative to also look at and say, okay, well, what are these foods? Let's have a look at them. Let's see how we can add them to the diet, and let's see how we can enjoy them, the textures, the flavors, the nutrients that are in them. And what that does is it also helps on the economic side with helping to farmers to have a way to sell their products, to get that out. So that's kind of what we've done around biodiversity, and trying to encourage that from a perspective of, this is really good for you. It's exciting. It's going to taste good. I know, in India, whenever I'm there, there's so many different ingredients that come on the plate, and it's amazing. Who'd want to just eat white rice when you can choose so many different varieties? You can get all the textures, the tastes from them, or lentils or millets or different things. There's so many different things out there for us to explore, and that's exciting for us, and it's exciting, and it's part of what life's about. So I don't want to lose that and not be able to discover something that might be my favorite.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that you like Indian food quite a lot. So thank you so much for telling us about the diversity that exists in our food as well, and how ingredients that are good for the planet as well as good for people. How you have brought them together with the chefs, for us to have a better food. Now, since we are on the future of food, there are two kinds of things that comes into my mind. So one was, of course, that due to the current pandemic situation, the restaurants and the entire food supply ecosystem has gotten disrupted quite a bit.
Yeah.
And also there is conversation around the fact that what is the future of food going to be, considering the fact that there are a lot of these alternate solutions like meatless burgers and things like that are coming forward. So while you have traveled across different parts of the world, what kind of changes are you see is coming, and what would probably the future look like according to you?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting one. So, there's been a number of reports which have shown that from what we eat, our diet has a major impact on what's grown around the world. So obviously, farmers grow things that people want to eat. And so, if we all then want to eat the same thing, what ends up happening is farmers will grow that, but that has a byproduct. It has an impact. And that impact could be, for example, if you've got beef is really big and in demand as many parts of the world continue to develop. And so that's having a direct impact in parts of the world like Brazil, where rainforest is being cut down to enable grazing, because beef require a lot of water and a lot of grazing room. And so that has an impact on our rainforests. And so you see these kinds of impacts around. There's other grains and as like even rice uses a lot of water. And if you're using that in a place where there's a drought, then there's a problem, because if everything is rice, then you've got a problem if your water starts to become an issue. And I know in India, that's been a challenge, where the growing population, which is built around rice, and then rice uses a lot of water. So I see there's going to be a lot of new ingredients, things that are smarter, that use less water. I think they're going to come onto the menu. I also think there's going to be a lot of a move in many markets around alternate proteins. I think there's a lot happening on the technology front in that regard, but there's also a lot of awareness and interest around what are the alternatives in terms of legumes, different types of food that have a better environmental footprint. There's an ethics around them as well. And so how do you utilize and build them into the diet? I think there's also some challenges in this, because sometimes what we do is we go, okay, let's have something that's better for the climate, but it's still bad for us. And what I think I'm looking for is initiatives and innovations which are good for people and also for the planet. So they're not just thinking about making it better for a climate change issue, but they're also better for nutrition. So, nutrition sensitive and climate smart really needs to be part of the future, so that we're not just, moving 1,000, calorie burger for another that just happens to be plant-based versus not. We're actually looking at something that's got more nutrients that are better for us, and maybe a lower content level in terms of still the same, still good flavor, still everything else, but just not with, because obesity has become an overweight is a real issue. So while we've got the hunger issue, we also have 2 billion people that are not getting the nutrients they need. And many of them also are having issues around overweight and obesity. And so really quickly, we're seeing this kind of challenge. So I think that the diet of the future will hopefully be more diverse, will hopefully be good for the climate and also for people.
Right. So let's hope that diet of the future we are able to achieve soon and take it to more people than we ever could. And, as you rightfully said, that good food is a foundation for everything, providing energy needed to fight for this better future for everyone, everywhere. Without good food, no other progress is possible. And on that note, my question to you would be that, as I understand that SDG2 Advocacy Hub, you have created a blueprint sort of to deliver good food for all. Could you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. So what we've done is we've really looked at the Sustainable Development Goal 2, and we've said, the tagline for it is zero hunger, and zero hunger is very important. But at the same time, it also talks about the fact that we also need the right nutrition. We also need to look at the farmer livelihoods. We need to look at the environment. We need to look at biodiversity. And so what we've done is look at the fact of, at the moment, we face lots of challenges, but at the heart of them, we have the idea that food is really essential for all progress. So that if we don't have good food, and the question is, well, what is good food? And so this could be a whole hour-long discussion, because what you think is good food, what I think is good food, what Radhika thinks is good food is going to be a little bit different. But that's okay, because what, we don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to think the same to actually drive progress. But I think what we all do need to do is come up with an agreement of, well, when we talk about food, it's not just what tastes good. It's not just what makes us feel full. It's does it help us be the best we can? Does it help babies grow well so that they have fully developed opportunity? Does it help if a mother's pregnant, that their baby has the nutrients to be born with the same opportunity that everyone else has? Does good food mean that farmers are well looked after? That farmers aren't, not able to afford the food they grow when they put the labor in? Is it, does good food help drive the economy and help make the country strong? Does good food, help? Is it nutritious? Does it actually give you what you need? So all of these elements, but is it also something that's cultural? Does it celebrate life and love and the things that so we've built this kind of campaign to say, as we come out of COVID, as we move forward, We really wanted to build a narrative to talk about the challenges and opportunities, but to sort of position good food at the center. But do that from an equity perspective, because we all know that we don't get through these challenges in our world without us all getting through. So we have to find solutions where good food needs to be for all, not just for some. We already have good food for some. What we need is good food for all. And so what we want to do is really inspire a new group of people to start to think about how do we contribute towards good food for all? How do we work with our governments, our businesses, to think about strategies to build towards good food for all? And coming up next year is the UN Food System Summit, which the Secretary General has called. And this UN Food System Summit creates a unique opportunity for high-level political leadership, but also for people. It's meant to be the People's Summit. And the team, Agnes Kilabata, the Special Envoys, really raised this idea of it, this being the People's Summit, and really driving forward the idea of how do we ensure that everyone gets access to good food for all. And so it's a way for us to be able to do this campaigning and to be able to have this conversation over the coming years to achieve SDG 2.
Thank you, and that sounds really great. And we look forward to participate in the People's Foods Summit next year. From Alexis Society and Youth Forum India, we would be glad to contribute in any way possible. And at this moment, let me bring a young voice into the equation. And I have with me Radhika, who is a young student and a member of our global volunteer community. And she has a couple of questions for you. So Radhika, please introduce yourself and ask your questions.
Yeah. Hi, I am Radhika and I'm studying at Symbiosis School of International Studies. I'm doing Masters in International Studies. So having gone through your conversation right now, which is very insightful, the first question which I have is, how can the youth play a role in promoting kitchen smartness, or like promoting a diet which is more smart, in the sense it is less of wastage? You use the food waste to create something which is more innovative, and you produce something from indigenous consumption, which is also good in taste. And that is like, how do we make our consumption more effective?
Yeah, it's a great question, Radhika, because I think, the reality is, farmers will grow what people want to buy. Chefs will also cook things that people want to eat. So if you start asking when you go to a restaurant, when you are talking to someone, to say, well, show me what's more sustainable, or tell me a little bit about your principles, or where did you source that from? Do you know the farmer that you got this from? Is it from a seasonal, or is it this? So if you start as eaters, as I would call, we're all eaters, we eat food. As we make choices every day around where we invest, where we spend our money, and how we spend it. So I would say youth can play a really key role in setting trends, in thinking about what the choices they make. How do they choose what to eat? Because if you start to choose something, that's how new trends start. We see this online all the time. Food is one of I think it's second or third most shared thing on social media in many parts. So everyone likes to share a beautiful dish, something they ate, something they really enjoyed. If you start to share and use your voice to advocate for ingredients which have these stories, which have more depth, then what you're going to do is you're going to actually start to bring about that change. So I think the first thing young people can do is really ask questions about where their food comes from, to look at their food, to look down and to think about what they're doing, and not just make choices that are irrelevant of that.
Thank you so much. I will make sure I take up some of those in the future. My second question was, since you've been advocating on sustainable consumption and zero hunger, what would be the 3 suggestions that you would like to give to all of us in order to contribute actively to zero hunger,
Yeah.
and specifically the youth. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say one of the big things is lead by example. So I would think, how do you minimize food waste? How do you think about plant forward diets? A lot of people are moving towards just meat focused diets, and there's nothing wrong with meat. There's lots of people need to eat some meat. Meat is really good to eat, but it also has a big environmental impact. If everyone eats just a diet that's all meat focused, then we have some issues. So we talk about being plant forward. How do you think about the plants making up the most of the dish? And then also thinking about how do you introduce lesser known ingredients? So think about how do you think about ingredients that maybe use less water, or that are better, they grow more intensely, or there's different elements there. So one example of that is millets, for example, which often uses, I think, 1/5 of the water of rice, but it also has higher nutrients. So I would say lead by example. Then I would say educate the people around you. So educate people that are less aware, and about what you do and the impacts it can have, that your diet can have. And then I think the third point would be that youth should really ask questions, so they should really ask questions about where their food comes from. They should do research around this. They should ask, when they go to a restaurant, ask the chef to come out and explain where the food comes from. If everyone does that, the chef will, maybe not for the first 5 or 10 times, no, depending on the restaurant, but after a while they'll go and find out, or they'll have that story. And so it's thinking about, how do you think about that? Get to know a farmer, get to know where go and see some food growing if you live in the city, and all of a sudden it changes your perspective. I've got a friend who works at a group called GIY, and it's Grow It Yourself, and he just says, by simply growing some food, even if it's in a pot in your apartment, if you're in the city or something, it creates empathy, because you understand the challenge of growing. You understand more about where the food comes from. And that changes the way you see food, because you don't want to throw it out. You know how much water, how much energy, how much attention goes into growing that food. And so it becomes less disposable. So I'd say lead by example, educate, and then really ask questions. They're the three areas I would focus on.
Thank you so much, Radhika, for your questions. And thank you so much, Paul, to give us, the young people, some action points that we can quickly take up and make some change happen. Now, to sum up, of course, to solve the zero hunger, we also need to parallelly solve climate change and women's rights issues, as you said. And most importantly, we have to go local. The diet of the future has to be nutrition sensitive and climate smart. We have to be plant forward, act plant forward, and then only we can have a sustainable food ecosystem. And most importantly, all the young people listening in, use your voice for good. Ask where your food comes from. Talk about it on social media and raise the voice. Share, what you ate. Where did it come from? Tell the stories so that all of us can be then inspired to take action and go back and ask for that as well, so that we become a little more curious about our food. Before I conclude, Paul, I have one last question for you. If you have to sum up the vision for a better world in one sentence, what would that be?
I would say good food is the foundation for everything. It provides the energy we need to fight for a better future for everyone, everywhere. And that without good food, no other progress is possible.
Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us and giving us such insightful pointers for us to take action. Now, one thing that I should end with is in the Good Food for All blueprint that you have at the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, it says good food is love. Love of flavor, health, celebration, and adventure. Love of children, friends, and family. Love of people and planet. Love of our neighbor and 7 billion others who we do not know personally. And that's such a beautiful message that I found on your website, on the blueprint that you have. And thank you so much for inspiring us. And everyone who is listening in and joining in, thank you so much for joining as well. And for a world where no one is left behind, it has never been clearer that all of us have a role to play in order to bring about change. Whoever you are, no matter where you come from, every one of us can make a difference. Every action truly counts. Get involved, attend the SDG Action Conclave 2020, participate in the SDG quiz, help raise awareness about the goals, and connect with a global community of passionate volunteers. This Global Goals Week, let us all come together to spread the knowledge about people, planet, and our sustainable development goals. Thank you all for joining us. Follow us on Instagram at Youth Forum India for all the updates. And don't forget to join our next session. Paul, once again, a very, very real thank you from our end for joining us. Thank you for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to having conversation once again with you. Thank you.
Thank you.